People often talk about moments like these as if they just appear out of thin air. One minute, everything seems fine, and the next, you're hit with the harsh truth. Your world falls apart in an instant. But looking back, those cracks were always there, man. They had been forming over time, months, maybe even years, and I was too distracted, too tired, too naive to notice them. Elena and I had been married for a decade long enough to slip into routines. I thought that was just how life goes. It wasn't some rom-com fairy tale. We had 2 kids, Liam, who was 8, and Maya, who was 5. Every day felt like a blur of picking them up from school, responding to work emails, and having dinner in silence, with no real conversation. I kept telling myself it was just a rough patch. Things get challenging when you've been in a relationship for this long, right? But then I saw the text. And no, I wasn't snooping around, okay? I swear. I wasn't some paranoid husband trying to catch her in the act. I wasn't that guy. It just happened. Her phone was sitting there on the counter, buzzing nonstop while she was in the shower. Normally, I wouldn't even think twice, but it kept vibrating. And, well, curiosity got the best of me. I picked it up, and there was a message from someone named Evan Carter. Can't wait to see you. Same time on Wednesday. My stomach dropped. My hands were shaking so much I nearly dropped the damn phone. I stared at the message, trying to make sense of it. Same time Wednesday. What the hell was that supposed to mean? I considered opening the whole conversation to see what else was there, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I don't know why. Maybe I was scared of what I'd find. So, I put the phone back exactly where I found it and walked away like nothing had happened. But everything changed after that. I started paying more attention to Elena's behavior. You know how, when something feels off, you start replaying old memories with new eyes? Things that didn't seem like a big deal back then suddenly clicked. I remembered how she'd been working late more and more. At first, it was just the occasional late night, but recently, it felt like it was happening every other day. Sorry, babe, we have a deadline, she'd say, flashing that sweet smile while kissing my cheek, as if that made everything better. And those weekends when I'd try to plan things, picnics in the park, movie nights with the kids, she always had an excuse. I'm exhausted. Can we just stay home and rest? She was pulling away, slowly but surely, always somewhere else. And whenever I tried to talk to her, hell, whenever I tried to talk about anything, she brushed me off like I was some annoying coworker. Forget it. I can't even remember the last time we shared any real connection. And when I brought it up, she'd sigh and say, I'm just so tired, Nathan. It's not about you. But it felt like it was. It felt like I was some burden she had to carry. The messed up part is, I still loved her. That's what makes this all so complicated. I knew something was off, but I wanted to believe we could fix it. I wanted to believe this was just a phase, that everything would go back to normal. But I couldn't bottle it up anymore. So, I called Luke, my best friend. Luke had been through hell with his ex-wife. So if anyone could offer some advice, it was him. We met up at a dive bar downtown, and I sat there, swirling my drink, trying to figure out how to bring it up. Finally, I just blurted it out. I think Elena's cheating on me. Luke put his beer down slowly. What makes you think that? He asked. I told him about the text, about her coldness lately, about all the little things piling up that didn't add up. He listened, nodding, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he leaned back and sighed. Look, I get it. I've been where you are, thinking the worst, letting it eat me alive. But you don't have proof yet. Don't go nuclear unless you know for sure. So, what? I just sit around and wait for more texts? No, Luke shook his head. You follow her. Keep it quiet. You need to know exactly what you're dealing with before you confront her. Otherwise, she'll just gaslight you. That conversation stayed with me for days. I felt like I was losing my mind, questioning everything she said, every little thing she did. The hardest part was pretending like everything was fine, smiling, making small talk, acting like I wasn't dying inside. Then, Wednesday rolled around, the day from the text. I told Elena I had a late work meeting. She barely looked up from her phone. Okay, have fun. Just like that. No questions, no curiosity. That night, I followed her. Stayed far enough behind so she wouldn't notice. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I watched as she pulled into a hotel parking lot, some cheap place on the edge of town. My stomach twisted. I parked a few spaces away, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. And then I saw him. This tall, smug-looking guy stepped out of his car and walked right up to hers. She smiled at him, smiled in a way she hadn't smiled at me in months. My chest felt like it was collapsing. They kissed right there in the parking lot, like it was no big deal. I froze, watching as she climbed into his car. They drove off toward the hotel entrance, laughing like teenagers sneaking around. That was it. That was the moment everything fell apart. I knew deep down that this was real. I wasn't crazy, and I wasn't imagining things. My marriage was hanging by a thread. But knowing the truth didn't make it easier. It just crushed me. I stayed in that parking lot for what felt like hours, trying to figure out what I was supposed to do next. Because once you know, you can't unknow it. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I hadn't slept at all. My head was pounding, and the weight in my chest hadn't lifted. The house was silent, just the hum of the coffee machine in the kitchen. Elena was at the counter, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. Like the night before hadn't even occurred. I sat across from her, nursing a cup of coffee I didn't even want. I just stared at her. She looked completely normal. No guilt, no shame. No sign that she'd just spent the night with Reed at some cheap hotel. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab her phone and throw it across the room, demand answers. But I knew that would just make her shut down. Elena could be like that. Cold, distant, impossible to reach when she didn't want to talk. Instead of losing it right then and there, I decided to keep it together. I gave her a small smile and said, "Hey," in the most casual tone I could muster, like nothing was wrong. "How have you been feeling?" She didn't even look up from her phone. "Fine." "Why?" I forced another smile, even though it felt like my face was going to crack. "You've seemed distant lately. I just wanted to check in, make sure everything's okay." For the briefest moment, I thought I saw a flash of something in her expression. Guilt, maybe, regret, but it was gone in a heartbeat, like it never happened. "I'm fine, Nathan," she said flatly, her voice lacking any warmth. "Just tired. Work's been crazy." Work. I wanted to laugh. Or maybe just sit there and cry. I nodded, trying to play it cool. "If something's bothering you, you can talk to me. You know I'm here." She finally looked at me, and for a split second, I thought maybe she was going to say something real, something that could make sense of all this. But no. Instead, she smiled that practiced, fake smile, the one that had become so familiar it almost made my skin crawl. "I'm fine," she repeated before standing up. "I have to get ready. The kids need breakfast." And just like that, the conversation was over. A few days went by, and I kept trying to hold everything together, waiting for the right moment to confront her. But there was never a right time. There was always something else. Soccer practice, work deadlines, or just the constant shuffle of life. Nothing ever stopped, not even when I felt like my whole world was shattering. But I couldn't keep pretending anymore. It was eating me up, the lies, the fake smiles, the wondering how long she'd keep coming up with excuses to sneak around. One night, after the kids were asleep, I couldn't hold it in any longer. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling mindlessly through Netflix, as if everything was just fine. I sat down beside her, my heart hammering in my chest, practically suffocating me. "I know," I said, my voice quieter than I intended, but it was firm. She glanced up, furrowing her brow. "What do you mean, you know?" "I know about you and Reed," I said, my throat tight, the words feeling like they were coming from someone else. "I know what's been going on. The hotel, the meetings." Her face didn't even change. There was no shock, no surprise, just that cold, distant look that made my skin crawl. "So what?" she said, like it didn't matter at all. I stared at her, my mind racing, unable to process that she wasn't even trying to deny it. "How long?" I asked, barely able to keep my voice steady. "Few months," she answered without a second thought. The floor felt like it had disappeared beneath me. "Why, Elena? Why would you do this to us?" She met my gaze then, but there was no remorse in her eyes. No apology, just frustration, Like I was the one at fault for being upset. You stopped seeing me, Nathan. You stopped trying. I needed something, and Reed was there. I sat there in shock. I didn't stop trying. I whispered, my voice breaking. I've been here every single day, trying to make this work. She rolled her eyes. Being here doesn't mean being present, Nathan. You haven't really seen me in years. Her words hit harder than I ever expected. So your answer to all of this was to sleep with someone else? I snapped, the anger finally spilling out. You don't understand, she shot back, her tone cold. I've been alone in this marriage for so long. I just stopped caring. That's complete bullshit. I fired back, my voice rising. You gave up on us. You didn't try to fix anything. How the hell is that fair? Fair? She let out a bitter laugh. Do you think it's fair living with someone who makes you feel like you're just a roommate? Like you're invisible? Her words stung more than I thought they could. I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, but deep down, I knew there was some truth to what she said. I wasn't perfect, but I never cheated. Do you even love me? I asked, the question barely a whisper, as if I was already bracing for the answer. She looked away without saying a word, and that was all the answer I needed. From there, the argument just spiraled. We threw years of resentment at each other, words we couldn't take back. I accused her of being selfish, of destroying our family over some fling. She called me emotionally unavailable, said I was a stranger to her now. In the midst of it all, I found myself begging her to fix this, actually begging. I want to save us, Elena, I pleaded. For the kids. For us. We can make this work if we try. But she just shook her head slowly. I don't know if I want a Nathan, she said quietly, her voice final. I don't even know if I love you anymore. Those words were like a punch to the gut. Jesus Christ, Elena, I muttered, my mind spinning. How did we get here? She didn't answer. She just sat there, staring at the floor like she was waiting for me to leave. And in that moment, it hit me. I cared more about saving our marriage than she did. I was still willing to fight for us, but she wasn't even sure she wanted to try. The silence between us was deafening. We agreed to take some time apart, see if the marriage was worth salvaging. But honestly, I had no idea what that even meant. It felt like we'd pressed pause on everything. But life doesn't stop just because yours is falling apart. There were still lunches to pack, work emails to send, and kids to shuttle to practice. On the outside, we still looked like a family, like everything was just routine. But every moment we spent together was heavy with tension, like a rubber band stretched too far, waiting to snap. Elena acted like nothing had changed, like her affair was some nightmare we could all forget about. She'd ask if I wanted to order dinner, or suggest a movie night with the kids, flashing that smile like everything was fine. But every time she smiled at me, it felt fake, like she was just playing the role of good wife, without ever believing in it. I tried to go along with it, for the kids, if nothing else. They were too young to understand what was really happening, but kids aren't stupid. They could feel the shift, and it started showing. Liam became clingier, always asking if I'd be home for dinner. Maya started throwing tantrums over the smallest things, like not getting the pink bowl for breakfast or missing a bedtime story. It hurt seeing them like that. And every time Elena and I crossed paths, it felt like a battle of passive-aggressive tension. We'd ask each other basic questions, the kind you ask someone you barely know. What time is Liam's practice? Did you sign Maya's permission slip? Polite, but icy. Every word a chore. The elephant in the room, the betrayal, the anger, the resentment, loomed over us constantly, but neither of us knew how to address it without exploding. I spent nights lying awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head. How did we get here? Was this always how it was, and I just couldn't see it? Or had things changed so slowly that neither of us noticed until it was too late? One night, after another painful dinner where all we could hear was the sound of forks scraping against empty plates, I realized I couldn't keep living like this. I was drowning in silence, and I needed help. So, I made an appointment with a therapist, Dr. Harper. I didn't bother telling Elena. It didn't feel like it would matter. She probably wouldn't care anyway. Dr. Harper was an older guy, probably in his 60s, with kind eyes and a straightforward, no-nonsense approach. I wasn't sure what I was expecting from him, maybe some magic words to fix my broken marriage. But instead, he gave me a harsh dose of reality. "You're angry," he said after I spilled everything about Elena's affair. "And that's okay. You've been betrayed by the person you trusted most. But trying to bury that anger and pretend it isn't there, that will eat you alive." "I don't know what to do," I admitted, slumping back in the chair. "I want to fix things, but I don't even know if she wants to. It's like she doesn't care anymore." Dr. Harper jotted something down in his notebook and nodded thoughtfully. "Here's the thing, Nathan," he said, his voice firm but understanding. "You can't force someone to care. And you can't make a decision like divorce based on anger or guilt. You've got to let yourself feel it all, the hurt, the frustration, the confusion, without rushing to a solution. Give yourself the time to process. This is a long road, not a quick fix." His advice made sense, but it didn't make anything easier. I still felt completely lost, stuck in a state of limbo, like I was wandering through emotional fog with no way out. At least I had somewhere to vent now, and that was better than keeping everything bottled up inside. Back home, nothing improved. Every time Elena and I tried to talk, really talk, it ended in disaster. She would always respond in that same detached, emotionless tone, like she was reading lines from a script. "I know I hurt you, Nathan, but I can't change what's happened. I'm not asking you to change the past," I would say, trying to stay calm. "I just want to know, do you even want to fix this? Do you want to try?" And she would sigh, like she couldn't be bothered. "I don't know. I don't have all the answers right now." Her indifference cut deeper than the affair itself. At least when she cheated, I could feel something: anger, betrayal, pain. But this cold, apathetic version of Elena made me feel like I didn't matter at all. Like all the years we spent together, the memories, the kids, had no value to her. One night, we tried again to have an honest conversation after the kids went to bed. I poured us each a glass of wine, hoping it would take the edge off for a few minutes. For a moment, things almost felt normal. We talked about work, about the kids, even laughed at something Maya had said at school. And for a split second, I thought maybe, just maybe, we could get back to something real. But then the conversation shifted, and I asked her again if she was even willing to try to save our marriage. "I'm trying," she said, but her voice had no conviction. "No, you're not," I snapped, the frustration rising inside me. "You say you're trying, but it doesn't feel like it. It feels like you've already checked out." "Maybe I have," she replied quietly, staring down at her wine glass. That was the moment I knew for sure. I could forgive the affair, as painful as it was, but I couldn't forgive her for not caring, for not even being willing to fight for us. That night, we went to bed without another word. I lay there, beside her in the dark, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. I wanted to reach out to her, to hold her, to feel some kind of connection, but the space between us felt insurmountable, and I knew, no matter how far I stretched, she wasn't going to meet me halfway. That was the worst part. Not the lies, not the betrayal, but the cold realization that the woman I had spent years with, the mother of my children, didn't care enough to fight for what we had. Something inside me shifted that night. Lying in bed next to her, I knew I couldn't keep begging for her love. I had given it my all, but she had made it clear she wasn't interested. I couldn't let her drag me down any longer. If this marriage was going to end, I was going to make sure I came out on top, but I wasn't going to yell or scream. That would be too easy. No, I was going to play the long game. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. If Elena thought she could break me, she was dead wrong. I'd become the perfect husband, the kind she couldn't complain about, the kind she didn't deserve. I'd take care of the kids, buy her flowers, organize family nights like some kind of perfect picture of domestic bliss. And all the while, I'd keep smiling, acting like nothing was wrong. Let her wonder what I was really thinking. Let her squirm. I started small. The next morning, I made breakfast for the kids before Elena even got out of bed. Pancakes, eggs, everything. Maya and Liam loved it. And I made sure they told Elena how great it was when she finally wandered into the kitchen. "Daddy made pancakes," Maya said, beaming. Elena gave me a cautious smile. "That's nice, Nathan," she said, her tone flat. "Just trying to help out." I smiled back, keeping it as innocent as possible. A few days later, I brought home a bouquet of her favorite flowers, lilies. She looked at them, confused, as if she couldn't decide if it was a peace offering or some kind of trick. "What's this for?" she asked, her brow furrowed. "Just because," I said casually, brushing past her. "Thought it might brighten your day." She was thrown off balance, and that's exactly what I wanted. Over the next few weeks, I kept up the act. I played with the kids more, suggested we have game nights, even tried to make plans to go out on weekends as a family. Elena started to act a little uneasy. I could tell she was watching me, trying to figure out what had changed. She knew something was off, but she couldn't put her finger on it. And that was the beauty of it. She couldn't accuse me of anything, because I wasn't doing anything wrong. Not yet. Then came the perfect opportunity. A social gathering at a friend's house. One of those casual affairs with too much wine and too many inside jokes. Elena's close friend, Chloe Bennett, was there. I'd always thought Chloe was attractive, blonde, sharp-witted, just the right amount of flirtatious. I wasn't planning anything serious with her, but I knew I could use her to get under Elena's skin. When Elena walked away to grab another drink, I slid into the seat next to Chloe, flashing her a grin. "You look great tonight, Cass," I said. "That dress is dangerous." She laughed, lightly touching my arm. "Dangerous? I'll take that as a compliment." We bantered back and forth, nothing too obvious, but just enough to let her know I was enjoying her company. Every so often, I'd glance at Elena, noticing the way her smile tightened and her eyes narrowed as she watched me and Chloe talking. She was picking up on it. No doubt about it. When Elena finally returned to our side of the room, Chloe leaned a little closer, laughing at something I said, just for effect. Elena's jaw clenched. I saw it, that flicker in her eyes. Jealousy. It wasn't obvious, but it was there, and honestly, it felt satisfying in a twisted way. On the way home, Elena was unusually quiet, the tension so thick I could practically feel it in the air. I kept my expression calm, even cheerful. "That was a fun night," I said, like nothing had happened. She glanced at me, lips pressed into a tight line. "You were really friendly with Chloe," she said, her voice cool, almost cold. I shrugged, keeping it light. "Just making conversation. She's a friend, right?" Elena didn't respond, but her grip on the steering wheel tightened, knuckles going white. It was clear she wasn't letting go of whatever was eating at her. Over the next few weeks, I kept up my little game. I stayed attentive, always playing the role of the perfect husband. One step ahead, always. But I dropped small hints every now and then, just enough to keep Elena off balance. A compliment to another woman while Elena was within earshot. A text from Chloe that I didn't bother hiding. Nothing too obvious, just enough to plant seeds of doubt in her mind. It started to eat at her. I could see it in the way she checked her phone less and less, as if avoiding it altogether. Her texts, the ones she sent me, became fewer, more impersonal. She started staying home more, pulling back, avoiding going out. Then one night, she suggested a date night. Just the two of us. I agreed, of course. Played along. Let her think she was pulling me back into the fold. But in reality, I wasn't interested in fixing things. Not anymore. I was done pretending. Eventually, Elena came to me, telling me she ended things with Reed. She didn't need to be asked. She told me flat out, almost as if she expected me to feel relieved. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice hesitant, uncertain. "I told Reed we can't see each other anymore." I feigned mild surprise, raising an eyebrow. "Oh? What made you decide that?" She shrugged, avoiding my gaze. "It just wasn't right. I need to focus on us, on the family." I nodded, keeping my face unreadable. "That's good, Elena. I'm glad." But inside, there was nothing. No relief. No sense of satisfaction. Just this hollow feeling. She was trying to fix things, but it was too late. I had already made up my mind. This wasn't about saving the marriage anymore. It was about watching her squirm. Watching her doubt herself like she had made me doubt everything. Elena thought she could hurt me and then just walk away with no consequences. She had no idea who she was dealing with. I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Elena thought her telling me she'd ended things with Reed would make me feel like I'd won. that I'd feel some kind of closure. But there was none of that. No satisfaction, no redemption. If anything, it felt like too little, too late. But she didn't know that. She thought she still had a chance to fix things, to somehow glue back together the mess she'd created. One night, after the kids went to bed, Elena sat down beside me on the couch. Her expression was softer than I'd seen it in months, like she was finally ready to open up. "I've been thinking a lot," she started, her voice tentative. "I know I hurt you, Nathan, and I'm sorry. I want to make things right. I want us to try again." For a moment, I just sat there, staring at her, my heart beating slowly, steady, as if it already knew what was about to happen. She had no idea. No idea that I'd been waiting for this moment, biding my time, planning my move. I leaned back in the couch, pretending to think carefully about her words, like I was really considering her apology. "It's good you've been thinking," I said evenly, keeping my voice calm, "because I've been thinking too." She smiled, a hopeful expression creeping into her face. "Yeah? So, what do you think?" I stood up, walking over to the kitchen counter where I'd left the divorce papers. "I've been thinking that it's time we get divorced." The color drained from her face. "Why?" Her voice was soft, like she couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. I dropped the folder onto the coffee table between us. "I already filed," I said, my voice flat. "I've already signed the papers. They're ready for you." Her eyes went wide, staring at the folder. You filed," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "Why? Did you honestly think we were going to work on this?" I asked coldly, the anger in my voice barely contained. "I thought about it for a long time, Elena, and I decided I'm done. I deserve better than this." She blinked rapidly, trying to process what I was saying. "Gary, please," she begged, her voice trembling. "We can fix this." I cut her off, my voice sharper than I meant. "No. You killed this marriage the moment you decided to cheat. I'm not going to waste the rest of my life pretending things can go back to how they were." For the first time in ages, I saw real emotion on her face. Panic, desperation, and maybe even a glimmer of regret. But it was too late for any of that. "I didn't think you'd actually—" She trailed off, her voice shaking, as if she couldn't comprehend what was happening. "That's the problem, Elena," I said, my voice steady now. "You thought you had all the control. You thought I'd just let you walk all over me. Not this time." She sat there in stunned silence, her mouth slightly open, as I turned and walked away, leaving her alone with the papers. The next few weeks blurred by in a mix of lawyer meetings, tense moments with custody arrangements, and the weight of it all settling in. I made sure to look like the perfect father and husband during every meeting. I wanted the lawyers, the judge, anyone else involved to see that I was the reasonable one, the one thinking about the kids' well-being. "I want joint custody," I told my lawyer. "No alimony unless absolutely necessary. I just want what's fair." Elena, on the other hand, was falling apart. She came to every meeting looking like she hadn't slept in days, eyes swollen from crying, confidence completely shattered. She didn't argue much. She probably thought agreeing to my terms would somehow ease her guilt. But guilt doesn't change anything. Guilt doesn't rebuild trust. When it came time to divide the assets, I made sure everything was split fairly, but I didn't leave room for negotiation. I wasn't out to ruin her. I just wanted to leave this chapter with my dignity intact. "I don't want to fight," she whispered during one of the meetings, her voice barely audible. "I just want this to be over." "Me too," I said, not even glancing at her. When the papers were finally signed, Elena sat across from me, her hands trembling as she scrawled her name on the dotted line. There was a strange, hollow silence in the room when it was done, like the air had been sucked out, leaving nothing behind. Afterward, as we left the lawyer's office, she stopped me at the door. "Nathan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm sorry. I really am." I studied her for a long moment, but something inside me had shifted. For the first time, I didn't see her as the woman I once loved. I saw a stranger. "Yeah," I replied quietly. "Me too." She gave me a small, sad smile, but I didn't return it. Without another word, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, alone with the weight of everything she'd lost. In the weeks that followed, it was impossible to ignore the toll it took on her. I could see it in her posture, the way she moved through life, like she was defeated, unsure of where she fit now. She tried to put on a brave face for the kids, acting like nothing had changed during school drop-offs and pickups, but it was obvious she was struggling. The life she had taken for granted was gone, and there was no getting it back. For me, though, it was different. I felt lighter than I had in years. The anger, the bitterness, the resentment, yes, they still lingered, but they didn't control me anymore. I was free, in every sense of the word. Elena had thought she could have it all, her affair, her family, her comfortable life. But she was wrong. Actions have consequences, and now she had to live with hers. The day the divorce became final, I didn't celebrate, but there was this quiet sense of relief. A weight that had been dragging me down for so long was finally lifted. There was no grand moment, no confetti falling, just a realization that, for the first time in a long while, I was free. I threw myself into being the best father I could be. The kids were my top priority, no question. I signed Liam up for travel soccer, even volunteered to coach a few games. Maya loved dance, so I made sure I never missed a recital, even if it meant rearranging my schedule around work, picking them up from school, or showing up at a game. For the first time, I felt connected to them in a way I hadn't in years. They never saw the bitterness between Elena and me. Even when things were tense, I kept everything smooth and cordial in front of them. I never missed a drop-off, never argued over holidays. If Elena expected me to slip up, she was going to be disappointed. I started taking better care of myself too. I hit the gym regularly, got back in shape, and even updated my wardrobe. It felt good, better than I had expected. I began going out more, making new friends, reconnecting with people I hadn't talked to in ages. On social media, I posted pictures of the kids, snapshots from trips, the occasional photo of a drink at a rooftop bar. The comments flooded in. "Looking good, Nathan," one read. "Divorce looks good on you," teased another. I wasn't flaunting my new life, but I wasn't hiding it either. And I knew Elena was watching. On the other hand, her profile had become a ghost town. She rarely posted anymore, and when she did, it was always vague. Pictures of the kids, or motivational quotes about new beginnings. It was clear that she was struggling to find her place in this new reality. I saw it every time she came to pick up the kids, pulling up in the same old car, her smile forced, her eyes tired. She was trying to appear strong, but I could see the cracks. I knew her too well. Behind that smile was regret. Regret for what she had lost, for the family she had destroyed, and for the fact that she could never undo what she had done. Every time I saw her drive away, a strange, quiet satisfaction settled inside me. It wasn't joy, not really, but it was closure. She had gambled it all, thinking she could have everything. And now, she had nothing. The final moment came a few months later at a mutual friend's party. I hadn't planned on going, but something inside me pushed me to show up. I wanted to remind people, and maybe Elena, that I was doing just fine. Better than fine. Actually, Chloe was there, looking radiant, as always. We hadn't seen much of each other since the divorce, but she greeted me with a warm smile and a playful hug. "Look at you," she said, taking me in. "Single life suits you, Nathan." I laughed and grabbed a drink from the bar. "I could say the same about you, Cass. You look amazing." We fell into easy conversation, the kind of comfortable banter we used to have. But there was something different now. An energy between us. A playful, unspoken chemistry I hadn't noticed before. At one point, Chloe leaned in closer, resting her hand lightly on my arm as she laughed at something I said. It was innocent enough, but the kind of innocent that might look different from the outside. That's when I saw her. Elena, standing across the room, frozen in place. Her eyes locked on me and Chloe. I could see everything in her face, a mix of jealousy, regret, and deep sadness. For a moment, our eyes met, and I saw it. She knew. She knew she had lost me for good. The hope she might have held onto was gone. I wasn't hers anymore, and I never would be again. I held her gaze for a second longer than necessary, then turned back to Chloe, smiling. "Come on," I said, taking her hand lightly. "Let's grab another drink." As Chloe laughed and followed me toward the bar, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what Elena was feeling in that moment, and I wasn't about to give her the satisfaction of seeing me hesitate. I was in control. My life, my choices, my future, they were all mine now. And as I walked away from Elena, leaving her standing there in the crowd, I knew I had finally closed the chapter on us.